So, is the men's rights movement misogynistic? This is a very common thing that I hear when I tell people that I'm a men's rights activist. People think that the men's rights movement is misogynistic and they think that MRAs are misogynists. But the reality is very different. MRAs are not misogynistic at all, and the men's rights movement does not support sexism against women and does not support discrimination against women in any way. When you look at the views of the men's rights movement and you look at the things that MRAs say and believe, we don't support sexism or discrimination of any kind. So when people say that the men's rights movement is misogynistic, I would challenge them and I would ask them, well, where? Where do you see this? Where do you see MRAs being misogynistic? What law do you see MRA support or advocate for that discriminates against women? Which view of the men's rights movement, which position or stance or belief of the men's rights movement do you see is misogynistic? And very frequently, when I get into conversations and debates with people about the men's rights movement and I ask that question, people can't really give me an answer unless they start talking about people like Andrew Tate or those kinds of extremist red pill figures who are not really MRAs at all. And people like Andrew Tate really have nothing to do with the men's rights movement at all. The men's rights movement is not calling for traditional gender roles. The men's rights movement is not against women's education, and we're not against women having careers, and we're not against women being equal to men. It really is quite simple. The men's rights movement simply wants to address disparities that affect men and boys, such as men dying younger, such as conscription, such as higher pension ages for men, such as the male education gap, where boys are falling behind in school and men have less scholarships, such as the homeless gap, where men are significantly more likely to be homeless. None of the objectives of the men's rights movement are about bringing women down, or misogynistic really in any way. The objectives of the men's rights movement are about addressing issues that affect men and boys. And to that point, we're not against the women's rights movement. There's a misconception that the men's rights movement is inherently anti-feminist, and that's really not quite how it is. We find ourselves very often in debate with feminists because feminist organizations very often argue against MRAs when we talk about men's rights. But we are not against addressing women's issues, and we do agree that women's issues and misogyny are perfectly valid topics. MRAs simply focus on men's issues and issues that affect men and boys, but it's not at all in any way a misogynistic movement. Another misconception people have is that the men's rights movement is a white men's movement and it only cares about white men, which isn't true at all because the men's issues that MRAs talk about affect men and boys of all races, of all nationalities, all around the world. In fact, if you take the United States, for example, issues like the incarceration gap, the unemployment gap, and the life expectancy gap, just to name a few, is even worse for black men than for white men, for example. So when you really look into the men's rights movement and what we believe, it's not a misogynistic movement in any way. But there's a lot of articles that spews a lot of misinformation and a lot of very disingenuous information that the men's rights movement is an anti-women's movement or a male supremacy movement. But this, quite frankly, simply isn't true. If you have any questions about the men's rights movement and what MRAs believe, I am a men's rights activist myself, and you can email me at blueorange22mra@gmail.com. Thank you very much.